Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully y'all are having a wonderful day today. So anyways, man, I thought that I would give my little fight review of this Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano fight. With that, we're going to review a video by Dante's Boxing Nation, who's really been trying to push Jermell Charlo and both the Charlo brothers for a certain amount of years. I've always said this about the Charlo brothers. I do think that they're both very, very talented, but they do have a certain amount of flaws. And that was showed again yesterday by Mr. Brian Castano, who, to be quite honest with you, I thought just pulled out the fight. Or to me, in my opinion, if I had to pick a winner out of the two, it would have been Brian Castano. I thought Jermell Charlo was clearly getting outthrown, outlanded. I thought that he was not able to handle a certain amount of his pressure attacks in really the first 8 rounds when it came down to it. Then, of course, Jermell, within the last 3 rounds, he was able to get off a little bit of his attack. But in my opinion, he probably should have lost that fight yesterday. But what I'm going to say is this. I don't necessarily have a huge problem with the draw. With some of the draws that have happened in recent history, I don't think that they've been the best decisions. Such as the Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin first fight. I don't think that fight was a draw. I thought Golovkin clearly won the fight. And when it came to Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder, that first one, I clearly did not think that was a draw. I thought overall that was clearly in Tyson Fury's favor. And that, to be honest with you, that was actually quite a bad scorecard. This draw right here, I'm not going to say that it was a bad scorecard because I do think that it was a very competitive fight. And I think I gave Brian Castano for sure 6 rounds that he won in this fight. I gave Jermell Charlo a solid 4 rounds in this fight for sure. And I do score draw rounds, which means that if I do score to draw a round, obviously that means that the round can go either way. And I had 2 draw rounds. So if you had those 2 rounds going in Jermell Charlo's favor, then this fight would have been 6-6 and it would have been a draw. So the draw, in my opinion, is not necessarily the worst outcome that could have happened, even though draws do tend to be somewhat annoying. But it is what it is. Anyways, when it comes down to it overall, in my opinion, Jermell Charlo probably should have lost this fight, but it is what it is. A draw is not the worst outcome, I suppose, when it comes down to it. Anyways, let's see what Dante has to say, because he's been trying to push Jermell Charlo and Jermell Charlo for a very, very long time. And Jermell Charlo was supposed to win this fight. But like I predicted, Brian Castano was going to be the toughest fight in Jermell Charlo's career, or debatably, because this dude, Brian Castano, he was going to be the best opponent that Jermell Charlo has ever faced in his career, hands down. And a certain amount of people may disagree. Like I've said, that 154-pound division, it's talented, but with B-class fighters. And I'm not even still sure if I would count Brian Castano 100% as an A-grade fighter. I suppose if you wanted to count him as an A-grade fighter now, because he's shown overall right now that he's got the skills, that he's got the heart, he's got the guts when it comes down to it. So if you want to count Brian Castano now as an A-grade fighter, I mean, sure, go ahead. You don't get a draw against both Erickson Lubin and Jermell Charlo if you're probably just some ordinary B-class fighter. But like I said, Brian Castano, he is the biggest threat to Jermell Charlo because he can take a hit. He's got fast footwork. He's got good feet. He's got good power. He's got good speed. He was a decent pressure fighter that was possibly going to give Jermell Charlo some problems, and that's exactly what he did. And that's why I said don't underestimate Brian Castano, because this dude was going to be the best fighter that Jermell Charlo had ever fought. So it is what it is. Anyways, let's get into the conversation. Let's see what Dante has to say. Let's get into it.
See, it is what it is. So you're saying bring on round 13? Yeah, apparently.
And guys, this is exactly what happens when the best fight against the best. Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So the fight, Charlo versus Castano, it ends in a draw. It was a very, very exciting fight, candidate for Fight of the Year. Castano, who beat Derevianchenko and Errol Spence in the amateurs, he proved that he's a real champion at 154. Now, before I go into surmising this fight,
besides Jermell Charlo, he really is the only other A-class fighter there. There's no other A-class fighters there besides Jermell Charlo and Brian Castano. And that's why, in my opinion, Jermell Charlo, I don't know if I can have him in my top 10 pound for pound, because within your past, 4 or 5 fights, you have a loss against the B-class fighter and Tony Harrison, and you also have a draw. I'm not sure if I can count you as one of my top 10 pound-for-pound fighters. Certainly not one of my top 5. Like, the LDBC and new media, they're literally trying to rank this dude within their top 5. I can't have someone overall like that in my top 10 pound-for-pound. Sorry.
I want to say this about Jermell Charlo. You guys remember, for the last couple of months...
And on top of that, for those of you also wondering the other categories that I rank, once again, I rank my pound-for-pound list off of 4 categories. I rank it off of dominance, accomplishments, resume, and skill set. And to be quite honest with you, besides accomplishments, I'm not sure if Jermell Charlo would have an A grade in any of those categories. I'm not sure if I would call him an A grade skilled fighter, even though he's obviously an A grade fighter. His dominance can't be A grade. He just had a draw and a loss against a B class fighter within the past few years. When it comes down to it, his accomplishments, of course, are A grade. He's won 3 belts, even though it's only been inside 1 division. But, of course, you have to rank an A grade there. And his resume, I can't necessarily say is A grade either, because, I mean, I can't really say that he's really beaten any A-class fighters. Had he beat Brian Castano yesterday, I would say that that would have been his first A-grade win. But, you know, he was not able to do that. So we'll see what happens.
Jermell Charlo, he was trying to win over the anti-black fans by basically catering to their narrative. You know, saying things like Canelo Alvarez is the best fighter in the world, Viva Mexico.
Well, he is, but it is what it is. Anyway, and Jermell Charlo also said that race didn't matter when it came to the Deontay Wilder-Tyson Fury situation. Which, you know, if he was saying it from the perspective overall of, you know, many people aren't predicting you to lose just because of race, then I would agree with them. But race, of course, always matters in boxing when it comes down to no matter who you are. There's always going to be people, you know, for you or against you depending on that. So it is what it is.
To diss Deontay Wilder, he even went as so far as to dissing his own brother. And I told you guys...
Did he really diss Deontay Wilder, or did he just say the truth on Deontay Wilder? Anyway.
Guys, in a video, that what Charlo doesn't understand is they may like...
Anyone overall who tells the truth on Deontay Wilder apparently is an Uncle Tom, or overall, you know, anyone who's a black fighter anyway. Anyone who tells the truth on Deontay Wilder, which is that he just got his ass whooped in that rematch, apparently, you know, you're an Uncle Tom, or overall, you know, you're delusional, or you're trying to diss Deontay. You know, like, come on, man.
What you're saying at the time, but they don't like you. And when you read the comments after I finish this video, matter of fact, comments all across the internet talking about this fight, these fans will prove that they were never supporters of Jermell Charlo because of what he said. So going back to the actual fight, first 2 rounds, Jermell Charlo, he wins easy. Surprisingly, Castano...
No. Actually, I don't believe that at all. The first round, I thought Jermell Charlo won. Well, no. Actually, that's not true. I'm trying to remember what happened. The first round, actually, I gave to Castano. I gave the first round to Castano. The second round, I gave to Charlo. The third round, I thought Charlo was winning, but then he got hurt at the end. So I had to give that to Castano because he actually buckled Jermell Charlo and nearly knocked him on his ass because he landed a good left hook. Within the first 4 rounds, I had Castano up 3-1.
Who throws a lot of punches, he was really reluctant to let his hands go. I thought in the first round, he was just trying to fill out Jermell, but he did the same thing in the second round.
Yes, he was a little bit reluctant to throw, especially when he got hit with that left hook early on in the fight. And I thought that Brian Castano, I thought overall that he was a little bit too tentative at times to throw. And sometimes he would only get to work in the final 30 seconds. But I still thought that it was enough because Jermell Charlo really was not landing a whole lot in this fight either. Jermell Charlo has a very big problem in not throwing enough punches at times. And the middle rounds completely went to Brian Castano.
Cost him in the second round because that's when Jermell Charlo, he hurt Castano really bad. Jermell backed up to the ropes, kind of baited him in, and caught him with a counter shot and hurt him bad. Credit to Castano, in the third round, he regained his confidence, and once he got Jermell Charlo to the ropes, he hurt Jermell Charlo with a hook. He threw a double hook, and the second hook really, really hurt Jermell. But credit to Jermell because he recovered real fast. I mean, he wasn't walking around staggering or anything like that. The punch just obviously really stunned him. Now, what I noticed in this fight is whenever Jermell stood in the center of the ring, Castano would not punch, which is why I don't understand why Jermell kept backing up to the ropes. Every time he backed up to the ropes, that's when Castano let his hands go.
Probably because Jermell Charlo doesn't have the boxing craft that you think he does. Like I said, Jermell Charlo, he is a very decent fighter. I'm not sure if I would say that he's an A-grade skilled fighter, and a certain amount of people may disagree with me. Jermell Charlo is a very decent boxer, but I've seen him get outboxed overall by a B-class fighter in Tony Harrison, at least when he was at his best. Now, some people overall will bring up overall, well, Lomachenko once upon a time got beat by Orlando Salido. Overall, you know, you don't bring that up, and you say overall that he's an A-grade skilled fighter. Yes, well, on top of that, that was Lomachenko's first professional fight in his career. Or not first professional fight, excuse me, but like his second professional fight in his career. And Orlando Salido was like a very, very, very rugged veteran. So you can maybe understand how that would give Lomachenko a little bit of problems, especially when it was only the second professional fight of his career. But when it comes down to it, I've seen Lomachenko beat greater fighters than Orlando Salido, who are more highly skilled than an Orlando Salido. I've never seen Jermell Charlo against an opponent who is more skilled than a Brian Castano.
If Jermell would have kept this fight in the center of the ring, and every once in a while, you know, lock horns with him, go head to head, back him up a little bit on the inside, this would have been a very, very easy fight for Jermell.
I'm not sure about that. Because Brian Castano, overall, he had decent power. He was able to hurt Jermell Charlo multiple times. He was very fast. It seemed like Jermell Charlo that he did not like some of the pressure that was coming at him.
Jermell, he wasn't throwing any uppercuts. He wasn't throwing a lot of body shots. It was basically just
They actually both weren't throwing a lot of body shots. That was something overall that I said that Castano should have been doing more of the fight, and Charlo as well. I said in my video that both of them would need to throw left hooks to the body especially, and neither of them really did it that much. I've seen it here and there, but it should have been happening a lot more.
a whole bunch of 1-2s, and then when he was forced to fight on the ropes, he would throw hooks. So basically, Castano controlled the fight on the inside, Charlo controlled the fight from the outside. Now, after the third round, a lot of those rounds could have went to Castano. He seemed to be the busier fighter, but even some of those rounds were very close. Then you go to, I believe, the 11th round.
There was a lot of middle rounds that, in my opinion, weren't super duper close. I would say that maybe a couple of the early rounds were close, and the last 3 rounds especially, there was a couple that went to Charlo. That last round, I think, maybe was pretty close. I think I scored the last round like a draw round. There was like a couple of rounds that were really, really close, but I still gave 6 for sure rounds for Castano. Like, I thought that there were 6 very clear rounds for Castano. But anyway.
Where Jermell, he hurts Castano really bad again. Matter of fact, by Castano's own admission, that punch, I believe it was a right hand, it hurt Castano. Castano was hurt for almost a whole 2 rounds. He said he was hurt that whole round, and he was still hurt the beginning of the next round. Now, Jermell, he took over all the championship rounds. In fact, all 3 judges had him winning rounds 10, 11, and 12.
The 12th round overall I thought was very, very close. So, you know, I could see that one going either way.
The funny thing is, the one judge,
at least if I'm remembering it right,
that actually had Castano winning the fight, 114-13, he actually was the only judge to score the 11th round when Charlo hurt Castano. He scored that a 10-8 round. So it was a...
Yeah, that's what I was wondering as well, which in my opinion should not happen unless the fighter gets knocked down or gets beaten up so bad to the point overall to where it clearly can be a 10-8 round. There should have never been any 10-8 rounds in this fight.
Really, really close fight. It could have gone either way, but I give Castano a lot of credit for giving Jermell Charlo his toughest fight.
And once again, you know, apparently Jermell Charlo, apparently there was some news about his glove or something like that yesterday, something weird with his gloves. But you notice that Dante and these LDBC and new media channels, they just completely dismissed that and they're not really talking about it. Now, do I think that there's any truth to that? No, probably not. But I don't think there's really much truth to Tyson Fury's cheating allegations either. So it is what it is. But once again, that just goes to show you, if Tyson Fury was a black man, especially from America, none of these allegations would have showed up in the first place. It is what it is. So once again, the LDBC and new media, they have their own narratives they're trying to push.
Or one of his toughest fights, because you got to include Harrison as well. Listen, I started this video off telling you guys that this is what happens when the best is fighting against the best. The junior middleweight division is one of the deepest divisions in the whole sport of boxing.
It's an okay division. But once again, I find it interesting how Dante, he calls the junior middleweight division, he calls it one of the deepest divisions in boxing. Most of these guys in that division have multiple losses in their career already before Jermell Charlo even got to them. But Canelo Alvarez, who's at 168 pounds, is facing undefeated fighters, A-grade fighters, like a Billy Joe Saunders or a Caleb Plant or even a Callum Smith, who's not on the same level as them, but still a decent fighter. You know, apparently Canelo Alvarez is facing, you know, the weakest division out there. You know, I just find that interesting. But Jermell Charlo is out here facing guys like, you know, Tony Harrison, who was knocked out twice before he even got to him when it came down to it. And overall, you know, he's facing guys like Jason Rosario, you know, who really is not an A-grade fighter. Even another very good fighter in that division like J-Rock Williams, you know, he's not really an A-grade fighter either, because he's lost by knockout a couple of times in his career, especially that major upset against Jason Rosario.
I mean, in order for you to become a champion there, you're going to have to really fight some tough champs. And
really, like who? like who, Dante? Erickson Lubin? Is Erickson Lubin an A-grade fighter? Is Julian J-Rock Williams an A-grade fighter? Araceli Lara used to be there, but Lara hasn't really been the same fighter for the past few years when it comes down to it, and he's not in that division anymore. Who there is A-grade besides Jermell Charlo and Brian Castano? That's what I'm saying. Once again, it's so hilarious overall what Dante tries to push when it comes down to it. You know, he says that this is one of the deepest divisions in boxing. Everyone there has multiple losses in their career when it comes down to it, or at least one solid loss. You know, that this you know, very clearly, it's not really one of the deepest divisions in boxing. I'm sorry. It's an okay division, but it's, you know, it's certainly not like the picture overall, like, let's say 135 or 140, you know, or 147, or, you know, even 168. Like, it's nothing like that.
In order for you to become undisputed, as you guys seen tonight, it's not as easy as it would be to fight against European C-level fighters, because I can guarantee you right now,
European C-level fighters, that was a diss at Canelo Alvarez. I don't know how the hell you argue overall that he's fighting C-class level European fighters, because Billy Joe Saunders very clearly was an A-grade fighter, and you know, if he faces Caleb Plant, he's very clearly an A-grade fighter as well. And let me tell you something, Dante. If Caleb Plant and Jermell Charlo had they been in a fight yesterday, let me tell you something. Caleb Plant would have whooped Jermell Charlo's ass, and it wouldn't have even been a draw, because when it came down to it overall, Caleb Plant would have made sure that it would have been a unanimous decision. But it is what it is. Anyway, and to be honest with you, Billy Joe Saunders at his best, I think he'd beat Jermell Charlo as well.
Every top elite level fighter right now could easily become undisputed at 168, where Canelo is, when it comes to who the champions are.
Really? So you think Jermell Charlo and Erickson Lubin and Julian J-Rock Williams and Brian Castano, you think overall that they would beat Caleb Plant? You think that they would beat a Billy Joe Saunders? Okay. I'm just saying I highly doubt that. But, you know. But that's how delusional Dante is. Anyway.
But you can't say the same thing when it comes to every elite fighter if they were fighting in the 154-pound division.
Oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. David Benavidez would clean up this division, no doubt about it. David Benavidez would clean up this division. Caleb Plant would clean up this division. Billy Joe Saunders would clean up this division. And Canelo certainly would clean up this division. There's no argument about that. I don't see any of those fighters. What, you think Erickson Lubin is going to beat any of those guys? You think Jason Rosario is going to beat any of those guys? You think Julian J-Rock Williams is going to beat any of those guys with his chin made out of cotton candy? You know, do you think that even Jermell Charlo is going to beat any of those guys? I don't think Jermell Charlo would beat any of those guys. That's my opinion, but, you know, do you?
You can't say everyone would beat Jermell Charlo, a Castano, or even an Erickson Lara.
Well, Lara's not there anymore. And I agree, not all those guys could have beaten Erickson Lara when he was in his prime. Let me tell you something. Lara, in terms of a peak, he's more skilled than either of the Charlo brothers. All right, that's the bottom line. Anyway.
Go even further and add Erickson Lubin. So I think this performance...
Yeah, Erickson Lubin, you mean the person that ended up getting knocked down in round 1 by Jermell Charlo? Erickson Lubin overall. Erickson Lubin, don't get me wrong, he's an okay fighter. He's not an A-grade fighter. Like, come on, he's not on the same level as a Caleb Plant. He's not on the same level as a David Benavidez or a Billy Joe Saunders. He's not even on the same level as a Callum Smith. Like, come on, man.
Makes Castano a star. And I don't know if Jermell is going to give him a rematch, because when he was asked at the end of the fight if he wants a rematch, he said, I don't know. We have to talk to Al Heyman. You would think that he would have said, I definitely want a rematch. So if he doesn't take the...
Well, I'm glad overall that you're at least mentioning that, because when it comes to the fighters that you end up supporting, even if they do appear like they're not taking certain fights, you don't seem to usually mention it. But we'll see what happens.
Rematch. Man, I could see some really good fights with Castano. Maybe Castano versus Erickson Lubin, because Jermell, he also said he shouldn't...
Castano would eat Erickson Lubin up. He would eat Erickson Lubin up. I have no doubt about that whatsoever.
Have to fight Lubin again. Now Lubin is his mandatory. I disagree with that, though, because we know that rematches, they often turn out different, right? I mean, we could...
The rematch overall would be very interesting. I probably would predict Jermell Charlo to win again against Brian Castano, just because, you know, he may adjust, and Jermell Charlo's power, you know, very clearly is still there. You know what's also interesting when it comes down to it is that Jermell Charlo, once upon a time, a lot of people may not remember it, but this was several years ago, when both Charlo brothers were on the come-up. Jermell Charlo always had very consistent power, but Jermell Charlo actually, once upon a time, he didn't even have a 50% knockout ratio. And then all of a sudden, you know, really just a few years back, all of a sudden he really started having this great power out of nowhere. You know, or I'll say about 5 years ago, he really started having this great power out of nowhere. But none of his fans, like the LDBC or new media, really questioned that. But when it came to a Tyson Fury, you know, who all of a sudden knocked out Deontay Wilder, when Tyson Fury was able to hurt him multiple times in the first fight, all of a sudden they questioned that. And they say, well, you know how I know he cheated? Because all of a sudden he had this great power out of nowhere. Well, certain fighters overall, like I said, depending on what they adjust, and personally depending on what they do, they may have more power a little bit later on. But in Jermell Charlo's case, it actually is a little bit more interesting because his power really came out of nowhere. But it is what it is. Anyway.
Even use a UFC reference. You see what happened with Conor McGregor and Poirier. Conor, he won the first fight and lost the last two. Same thing happened with Ali and Frazier. So clearly, Charlo, he feels that that's going to be a much more dangerous fight with this guy coming back after, what, 2-3 years? And who he had to fight to get to that #1 spot. I mean, he just knocked out Jason Rosario. So he's...
Yeah, Jason Rosario is not an A-grade fighter, Dante. I hate to tell you. Jason Rosario, if he were in any of these other divisions, he would have never been a champion in the first place.
Live dog, for sure. But once again, Lubin versus Castano would be a great fight. And then you also have Errol Spence, assuming he gets past Manny Pacquiao, which I do believe is going to be a very tough fight for Errol Spence.
It certainly can be, if it's the same Manny Pacquiao that showed up in the Keith Thurman fight. We'll see what happens with that fight. I am predicting Errol Spence to win that fight, though.
The Pacquiao fight. But if he gets past Pacquiao and can't make the Terrence Crawford fight,
which he's not going to be able to, because Terrence Crawford, he's with Top Rank. I heard he may re-sign with Top Rank when it comes down to it. And overall, Terrence Crawford apparently wants a 50-50 split. That's not going to happen. If you think overall that Errol Spence, who is one of the top 5 most popular boxers in the world today, if you think that he's going to give you a 50-50 split when he's fought all the big money fights and he gets way more money and way more attendance than you, if you think you're going to get a 50-50 split off of that, you're sorely mistaken. That's the bottom line.
Human Errol Spence moves up to 154. Spence versus Castano would be an excellent fight, especially considering there's already a story.
It would be a very interesting fight. That actually, I think, in my opinion, would be a very good fight.
Because this guy, Castano, he beat Errol Spence in the amateurs.
That is true.
But I personally would like to see the rematch before I see anything else, with Jermell going up against Castano again. He knows his style now.
Now, Dante, I wonder, Jermell Charlo, if he clearly does not take this rematch, or if he had the option to and clearly declines it, will you be talking about Jermell Charlo the same way that you're talking about Tyson Fury allegedly avoiding the Deontay Wilder rematch? Or will you be talking about him the same way, excuse me, that you talk about a Canelo or a Ryan Garcia or a Teofimo Lopez or a Gennady Golovkin? Will you be talking about him the same way? We'll see what happens.
Castano knows Jermell's style now. The rematch will be huge, and it will probably end up in a knockout or somebody getting knocked down.
We'll see about that.
You know, so let's see what happens. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
That's pretty much all I got for today as well. Anyways, we'll see what happens. I thought it was a very entertaining fight. Personally, if I would have given it to someone, I probably would have given it to Brian Castano. But it is what it is. I don't think a draw is really the worst result. But the one judge, once again, who scored at 117 and 111, obviously he should not be judging a fight again, because that dude had no idea what the hell he was watching, or he was slipped something under the table before the fight even happened. Because no way in hell, if you look at that fight logically and objectively, do you score that fight 9 rounds to 3. But it is what it is. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.